So welcome to Roundtable. You guys, I'm so excited to be leading Roundtable today with Emily Booth. How's it going today, Emily?
Awesome. It's Friday.
It's Friday. How's everything out in Colorado today?
The beautiful day, right, Kaylin? Finally, it's been chilly. I've got my girl Kaylin over there from Westminster.
Hello.
The beautiful Colorado day.
Yes.
So guys, today's roundtable, it's going to be a little different than the roundtables that we've had in the past. First, it's only Emily and I that are going to be hosting, so to speak, the roundtable conversation. And we're going to be talking about all things cycle. I also posted on the grid that we were going to have it broken out like how we normally do into 15-minute segments. But I just talked to Emily, and we're just going to have a conversation about cycle. So there's not going to be any rhyme or reason to what conversations we're having when, but the whole purpose of today's conversation is to address your questions and to give you support where you need it. Cool? All right. So I want to kick it off with questions that came in on the grid. And I think, Casey, you're one of a few performers who posted some questions. So instead of me reading it, do you want me just to toss to you, Casey, and just ask the question? It has to do with the kiosk, that you don't have a kiosk or an iPad for people to check in.
So my club does have an iPad, and almost all of my classes are waitlisted, and I never know how to check people in. I try to do it myself after every class, but with the wait list, you don't know who's there and who's not there. And so we've never had a penalty system in place, which just creates a mess with 25 people on a wait list, but people don't show up because they're not being penalized. And so it's just a really rotten member experience when people see that big wait list, yet they could have experienced the ride. And so I just wanted to know how to make that whole process better, get people in the classes in an organized way, and just what to do without that kiosk.
So I'm going to take that real quick. And I know you and I, JR and I both feel very passionately about this because we both also have very sold out classes. I teach a 5:30 a.m. class on Wednesdays that is oversold usually by 20 to 30 people at 5:30 in the morning, right? And so you can imagine people, if they cancel it at 4:30 a.m., a lot of the people that get into the class don't end up showing up. So two things that I have discovered, right? So you definitely, if you have the iPad, you do want to do a self check-in, right? So do you have a stand? We got a nice stand, and Kaylin can say, I think that's really helped. So before class, we just set the stand up. They check themselves in, and then you'll start to get a pattern, and you remind them how important it is and that it's for their benefit so that you can be their advocate in helping to eliminate those chronic no-shows. And then once you do have that, there is the potential that your studio manager can put a strike on those no-show people after 3 times, and they will not be able to reserve. So if you weren't aware of that, you can do that. It does require a little bit of effort, but I can tell you that from my experience, it's the same people all the time that don't show. And so
my question is this: when I go to the reservations website through FitMetrics on my own iPad, pull up the reservations, and that's where they check themselves in, correct?
No. On the iPad, there is 2 different, you should not be doing that. There's the FitMetrics logo, and then there's the Kiosk Pro Lite. There's 2 different apps. One of them is member facing, one of them is non-member facing. It's really important because the one that's non-member facing has personal information that you can't have out there. So you want to have the, you want to use the one that says FitMetrics and not Kiosk Pro Lite. So the Kiosk Pro Lite is the blue one that you have to log into. The other one, all you do is tap FitMetrics, choose your club. You will have to select your club every time. Select that club, select from the class list, and then the list will show up, and then they just check themselves in. And then at the end of, like, with the 5 minutes left, I'll look and say, have at it. The other thing that's worked for me is that I have finally got it through their heads. I have told them, guys, show up. Show up, show up, show up. And I finally got to the place where I have gotten back to that class, like not an empty bike, because people are taking me up on that offer. They've realized that, and they are getting better about showing up when it's a wait list like that for no shows. I understand it's frustrating, but the one thing you want to do is just be really diligent about letting them check themselves in using the correct app on the iPad. And then you should be able to, after class, just take a look at it and be like, I bet you after 3 classes, you'll figure out, okay, this person always reserves and never shows up. strike, and then, then you can add a strike in the FitMetrics system on the back end that you log into.
I will do that. A studio manager.
No, your studio manager should do that, but you need to let them know to do that.
So I'm the one that keeps track of how many people are chronic and no showing, right?
You should be, because I don't think I don't think you can count on somebody else doing that. So if you have you'll know who your chronic no-shows are.
Oh, I'm very well aware of them.
So if you can confirm that they've had at least 3 no-shows, I would give them a strike right now. And
my manager will know how to do that.
Yes. And if not, have her reach out to me or to Paula.
Thank you so much. This has been just a mess for months, so I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. JR, do you have anything else to add to that?
I mean, your answer is spot on. At Target Center, we do have an iPad, but we haven't been using it for my classes because our club has it budgeted to have a concierge for my 2 Target Center classes. And there's a couple others with performers at Target Center as well, where we have a concierge checking people in. So a greeter. So they're at a desk. We have an activities desk right outside the cycle studio. So they're there with the paper printed of the list. Bless you.
Bless you.
Thank you.
And then they also have the screen. And so what they're doing is they're checking people off when they come to the activities desk. So they're striking them on the spot immediately, like a minute or 2 after class begins. The concierge is doing the strikes. So again, it's a huge perk that we have at Target Center that they've budgeted for this. It's been a mess for a very long time. So their solution was exactly what I'm telling you. At St. Louis Park, we have the kiosk or an iPad right outside the cycle studio, and Alexis Collins is the cycle boutique manager there. And she has trained all members to check themselves in or they'll get striked. So it's because of Alexis that the process has worked as flawlessly there. I mean, there's bumps in the road every once in a while where somebody will, no show or they'll forget to check in, but they know to do it. So they're trained there. So those
I train my people.
Train them. Train them up.
Crack the whip.
Yeah.
Great question. Does that help you, Casey?
It really does. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Cool. So I want to throw another question that came directly from the grid out there. And this one came from Eliza, and this is about movements. So you're talking about movements for amp sculpt and edge sculpt, right?
Yeah. So I've kind of created, and I am OCD. If you know anything about me, I'm kind of crazy, and I have everything in a Google template, and I have created a tab for both my amp and edge and sculpt. There's one tab that's like my bank of moves for both on-brand moves for amp, but then also now I have a new tab with sculpting ones. I'm wondering if we can like crowdsource some moves that are tried and true that we can like look, because we all know bicep curls, but sometimes, we get into a funk, even if we know other moves. Like if there's a way we can crowdsource into a document to have upper body moves that are proven to work, that we can get on the bike and know that there's not going to be, because we all have times where we're in there fiddling around with bands and stuff like that. Just trying to get some more ideas.
JR, do you want to answer that?
Sure. So I'll kick it off and then take it from, I'll toss to you in just a second, Emily. So we have our 3 moves in 3 minutes that have existed for a very long time for amp cycle. We'll add to that, and Alexis Collins is working on that now. In addition to that, amp sculpt. So there are the amp sculpt 3 moves in 3 minutes. Everything that I'm talking about is on the bank. It's on the tab that's called recorded only series. So you'll see 3M, 3 moves in 3 minutes. It used to only exist for amp. Now it's amp sculpt, and we also have edge sculpt on there as well. It's a small bank of them, but Alexis Collins is working on adding to that. So recording more.
So I'm going to, just one thing I want to address, and I know that this is, I think it's a chronic or a continued concern. And I think it lives with everybody is constantly afraid of people getting bored or doing things that are, you're like, I'm so afraid of doing the same things. So I'm going to be very honest that there are only certain things that work. And in the absence of trying to, like, there are, especially with, there's only so much that you can do in that position. Okay. So that's to be effective. And often in the name of variety, we sacrifice quality and efficacy. And I see that happen in all kinds of things, everywhere from edge challenges to weights to barbell strength and whatever, and recognizing that there are things that can be manipulated and thinking about how to manipulate them. And the other thing that I really work on, I'm going to take it to Power Cycle for a second. Power Cycle deals with the same, because Power Cycle, everybody just accepts, they understand it's good training. So yes, there are going to be these kinds of intervals, these kinds of intervals, and these kinds of intervals. And the reason for that is that works this energy system, and this energy system works from this amount of time to this amount of time. This works that energy system. And nobody argues with that because we just know it's great training. But when we somehow forget that, when we lose our minds when it comes to other formats that aren't regulated, like, well, why wouldn't we? We're afraid of doing the same things. So you can make it different, but how do you make it different? You make it different. You change the equipment, you change the tempo, you change the order, and you change the music. You get better at how you cue it. So as much as, and there's also different ways of doing stuff, but I can't stress to you enough that as a person that has, I guess I've had a reasonable degree of success doing doing teaching classes, and I am probably the most straightforward, simple in every delivery. I do. I would rather my coaching and my education and my music and my performance take precedence over the stuff, right? And so I would invite you to do that. And the other thing I would say is that I've given this suggestion when I've taught some of the Edge Sculpt and Amp Sculpt live learnings, is that, well, in Amp Sculpt, you're limited to the equipment, but instead of doing, I would ideally, like, let's say, we'll talk Edge Sculpt for a second and then Amp Sculpt, we'll let JR chime in here. But in Edge Sculpt, you have two options for equipment. So I would, instead of having to feel the pressure of changing your routine every single class, that you teach the same weights routine, even if you taught a different challenge, like for 2 to 4 weeks, or maybe even more, like, for 4 classes in a row, right? So that people have an opportunity to get good at it, right? And so maybe you do one class that you do all dumbbells. And then the next, for 4 weeks in a row, then you do all bands. And then 4 weeks later, you do bands, dumbbells, bands. And then 4 weeks later, you do dumbbells, bands, dumbbells. And then you cycle back through it, and then it becomes fresh again. Because in the same way, like barbell strength could end up being, if you try to do every single potential tricep exercise in every barbell strength class you do, you'll never have anything new. But if you only do tricep push-ups and overhead extensions for 4 weeks, then next time you do kickbacks and lying extensions, it feels fresh again, right? And in the same way, I would suggest that your movements in your sculpting segments go in the same way. So how can you cue it a little differently? How could you change the reps? How could you, the exercise is the same, but you want to change a little bit about it and maybe give them an opportunity to adapt and get good at it before you change it again. So I don't know if that helps, but that's what I do.
So question, Emily, how do you know, we talk about keeping it simple in our classes. How do we know if we're being too complex? Like, maybe we think we're keeping it simple, but yet it's like something's not working. How do we know if it's too complex and we need to simplify?
That's a great question. I'm going to throw it out to the crowd. How do you know if something's not working?
You see it in their eyes. They're like, and everybody's off. So in Amp and Edge, everyone is pretty much, even though you're not saying right, left, they're all on the same beat. If they're not, and you see that kind of bubbling of people and they're not doing the movement right, you see it immediately when you're in a rhythm driven class.
100%. If they got it and they're enjoying it, I've always said, if you have to ask your group if they're having fun, they're not. If you have to find out, ask them if they got it, they don't. Because you'll know if they got it. You'll know if they're having fun. You'll know if they're with you.
So then in that moment, Aliza, where something's a mess in class, something's off, what do you do to get them back?
So if it's in an amp class, I just tell them to find the beat, feel the beat, listen to me, right, left, and I take all upper body movement out. If it's in a challenge, to be honest, I might be doing something right with Edge because I don't remember having a moment where I'm like, are we all with me? Are we not getting it? You know what I mean? I don't think I've had that. Now, there have been moments in AMP where perhaps the beat was too much for them and they couldn't do it. So then we have to simple it, get it simple. And then they come back within like an 8 count. And then if it's, that would be my one moment where if I had to repeat a movement, if it had to be an up, down, you know what I mean? Something that they know, like the AMP version of the step touch,
What about sculpt? AMP or edge sculpt, something's off.
I do the Alexis yoga, the yoga pose with the one weight to heart center. And I just get everyone right back to where it is, make sure their posture's good, that alignment. And then we started again. I took that from Alexis, her heart center yoga pose.
Repetition is your friend. So I would say that when I'm doing like edge sculpt test outs, and again, I'll use the example. Rob did an amazing job in his edge sculpt class, but he's a pro, right? And it's a fairly complex sequence that Rob nails it perfectly, but I've seen a lot of people try to do that same sequence and with lesser results because it's a more complex understanding of he knows exactly where to hit the beat to start to get it back up. Katie Guadalupe nailed it. She nailed it. I see that face. I was like, whoa, it was awesome. But I would and again, if you understand how to do a proper hold and people can get it and you get everybody on the beat, great. But my advice is instead of trying to do complex rhythmic sequences when you're first getting started, have them repeat something enough times till they got it. And then they'll feel it too. Then repeat it another times, another exercise till they got it. And then once they got it, then they're starting to feel fatigue. Then you can start to make your rhythmic, the number of reps, you can start to break it down. But this is lessons learned from teaching step for 100 years, right? Like if you're going to teach something, you have to layer it. And this is for people that teach choreography style classes, we learn the art of layering. And layering is you teach one thing until they got it, then you teach another thing until they got it, and then you teach it together, and then you cut it in half. And then and until they've got it, you don't add something new until they don't have if they don't have it, if that makes sense. Right? So simplifying, doing enough repetition. Variations can be utilized through rhythm. So you can do up 2, down 2. You can be up 1, down 3. You can be up 3, down, down. And you can do up 2, 3, hold up. You can have some really fun rhythmic variations that make it interesting without changing the exercise. So that if somebody got behind, they're still doing the same exercise, and at least they can catch up. If that makes sense.
Yeah, great explanation. Guys, any other questions about that? This is a big topic. All right, so since we're on the topic of edge, a couple questions for you, Emily, about the zone setting. How do you use the 3-minute zone setting?
Great. I'm so glad you asked. So we've had a lot of conversations recently, those of you that teach edge and power or edge or power, around the concept of FTP. My power teachers know that's functional threshold power. And I've seen more and more of you, which I'm loving. There is an option to do a test that can be utilized in edge. But before people proceed with that, and if you're watching later on this recorded version, this is for you too. There is an art to using that measurement. How many of you are using it right now, have used the zone setting in your edge or power class, in your edge class? And power, obviously, we know we do the, I'm using the term FTP, Jackie. So you're using LT Connect for FTP, right? So what we want to avoid is calling the 3-minute test an FTP test. Anybody want to tell me why we should not call it an FTP test?
Because it's not a true functional threshold at only 3 minutes.
Correct. No, it's not. And so that is, it is not really an FTP. And if all of a sudden people that don't understand become confused between the difference of when they do that true 20-minute test that provides a much more clear picture of their functional threshold, it's very different. But what it is useful as a zone setting tool. Now, so if you call it that, you can call it your personal power, your personal edge for the day. Just avoid calling it the 3-minute FTP because it's just not. And the keys to getting that right are a little bit of repetition. Sometimes it takes more than once to get it, but also to coaching it properly. And what you've got to know, here's what you need to know about that test. And I know I've said it in documents, but I'll ask you a question. How many of you 8 minutes into exercise are ready to go at your absolute limit for 3 minutes?
Nobody should be.
And so they're probably not going to be ready to do that. And here's the other thing. We have a lot of participants, especially in edge classes, that are used to doing short efforts, right? They've been conditioned to do 30 seconds, 45 seconds, maybe 1 minute. They aren't good at a 3 minute effort. They don't understand, and they come out, and I'll say, this is my dumb thing I like to say, they take off like a 10-year-old at a turkey trot, right? You've all seen that, right? The kid that runs like full sprint, and then, 3 minutes later, they're puking on the side, and then they walk and catch back up to their parents. Because they haven't learned how to pace themselves, right? They just think, I'm running. So if I'm running, I'm going hard. And then they realize that 6 miles for the first time in their life is not a big deal. And so for your riders, they have to understand that 3 minutes can actually be quite a long time at what that is. So just for your information, to get that set properly, we know that there are 7 power zones. That is got to be a zone 5 effort in order to set the proper power zone 4 effort for the stuff. So if they go at their threshold for 3 minutes, they will set their threshold 20% too low. And then your numbers are all off for the ride. So in order for them to get their numbers threshold set correctly, they have to go 20% above threshold for 3 minutes on average. And it is not easy to do. And so just keeping that in mind, it's a great drill. And I'd like to introduce some more fun ways to maybe incorporate it, because the members do really love it, right? I mean, you guys have done it with the members, they love it, right? They love the colors, it's fun, but being able to do it in a way that they get it, maybe it takes some time. It really comes down to how well you're able to coach them through it. So it's kind of a harder, everything effort. So you go 3 minutes, go hard, see where you are. If at 1 minute in, you feel like you can go more, go more. And then at 1 more minute to go, you got more, go more. And the last 30 seconds, it's kill yourself. Squeeze every watt out that you can. And then that will probably give them a decent representation when it comes down 20%. So I'd love to maybe have a whole topic on this at some point. Maybe some kind of even like a little online tutorial that we can talk it through, or better yet, maybe I'll teach it for you guys and do a recorded version of it so you can watch it in action. But it is a great tool. It's just to be used with caution and wisely. And not to be confused from a communication standpoint with FTP. The other thing is, guys, send them to power. Find out when your power coaches are teaching their FTP and have them go do the FTP test in power. Yeah? Okay. Questions on that? Thoughts?
And if it's not about that, guys, what other questions do you have about edge cycle or edge sculpt, since we're on the edge topic?
We're on the edge.
On the edge.
I have one question. So I've had a couple members ask, the email that they get with their printout is different than what they see on their console. And I understand some of the numbers, but the main one I've heard a lot about is the top watts. And they're close enough that, and I've seen the people ride, so I know they're both probably right. But why are their highest watts or highest RPMs or whatever different than the email that they get?
So Jackie and I have spent some time chatting about this. The thing is that there is a little bit of a disagreement in the algorithm and how it translates over. So it's not perfect. That also happens with Strava. And the way that pause times, the way that the bike interprets certain things, how it's interpreted through LT Connect versus straight from the bike is a little different, right? So it's kind of like the telephone game, right? It's going from it's going straight from the console into LT Connect, and there's a little bit of loss in translation. So anyway.
Is there one that you would say is more accurate than the other?
I've been telling them to go off the bike.
Okay, that's what I've been doing.
Because if you're playing the telephone game, go back to the original person that said it.
Yep. Thank you, Emily.
Especially, I would also say this, and this is, and I'll use the, at the stages training, this is the same topic, but slightly different. The idea that, you know, people go, well, how many calories did I burn, right? My console says I burned this many calories, but my Apple Watch says I burned this many. Well, which one's right? Well, we all know from, if you've taken any training, that mostly the activity trackers are very generous, right? And they're also not actually measuring power, whereas the bike is actually measuring the watts. So, but Javier Santin from Stages said this very nicely. If you want to tell people, if you want to be optimistic, you can put it somewhere between the bottom of what was on your bike and the number that you got on your watch. If you want to be realistic, and you know for sure at minimum that's what it was, then go with your bike.
Thank you.
Realistic, optimistic.
Emily, I have a question about how you coach the 20% thing. Are you talking to people in Edge about power zones, or are you just trying to get them to AT, or are you trying to take the power zones and then -1 to get to heart rate zones? How do you talk about that?
I speak to power as effort and relating back to a power number as it relates to their perception of effort and heart rate zones. So I don't call out the power zones specifically. I speak very specifically to how they feel and have them try to start relating back their own individual numbers at certain zones. Also, because as Kaylin will attest to, I am very repetitive. I mix my profiles up from week to week, but they come back, and maybe with a little bit of different order. But I do a lot of things like, you know, 3-minute efforts, 4-minute efforts, 1-minute efforts, 30-second efforts, 45-second efforts, pretty consistently 2-minute efforts. So they're going to get an idea at 2 minutes at my limit, this is what I did this week. And then 2 weeks later, if they're getting more fit, they're going to be able to know that, because they're going to come back to some of those efforts, or 3 minutes or 4 minutes. We do a lot of those, and it may take them a few months before they can add another 0.1 to a 4-minute distance effort, right? But they get there. And so they start to recognize their effort level and their own ability as it relates to benchmarks. So the key in teaching power in Edge is creating effective benchmarks and using your console. So you're not really saying a power zone, but you're having them relate back to meeting or beating previous efforts, whether from that class or from a previous class, right? They start to go, wow, when I first started out, I could only go, you know, a mile in 4 minutes, and now I'm going 1.2 regularly. And then one day they go, oh my gosh, I went 1.3. Eureka, I'm getting more fit, right? And so those are the kinds of things that if you use consistent metrics for challenges, that they're going to arrive at the conclusion that they're getting more fit over time. Does that help?
That's great. And it's classic Emily, which is coaching to feeling. I love it.
Coaching to feeling. And you do. And one more thing I'll say is that feelings are specific. And it isn't just hard or easy. There are specific sensations that if you get good at coaching, you're also coaching to the specific sensations. Your legs should feel fully engaged and heavy right now, or you should feel like your legs are lighter, but they're still engaged, and your breathing is rhythmic, but you can talk. You want to be specific about those feeling cues, because that's what's going to help them, not just hard or easy.
So take the example. Power Zone 4 is conversation is difficult. You have to focus. So if you add 20%, you get into Power Zone 5. Now we're getting into breathless and really hard effort.
100%. So coach them up to that threshold, and then it's like, okay, guys, for that last minute, if we're gonna get that extra 20% above our threshold right here. Here's where we're gonna get it. You're all in, and you aren't gonna like it. Okay. And maybe you could even say it should feel so hard that by the last 15 seconds, you're fading no matter how hard you're trying. Like things like that, you know, like if you got done feeling like you had a lot more to give, you probably didn't go hard enough. So things like that, right? So, and then that's why repetition is beautiful, because if they got to the end of it and they're like, oops, I guess I didn't go hard enough, and then they never get another shot at it, that's no fun. I want to come back and kick that thing's ass.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Oh, you're muted, JR.
Yeah, I muted it because I live next to an area where there's a lot of sirens, and there was a siren going by. Sorry about that.
Oh.
But okay, so there was a question that came in on the chat regarding the sculpting section of Edge. And Mel was asking, would it be possible to take the members off the bike for the sculpting part of Edge? How would you respond to that?
So when we first were piloting the format, we actually made it not required, but almost highly suggested that for the third sculpting segment, that it actually was off the bike. And Rob had suggested people came out of their shoes, and it was all in theory very, very cool and very lovely. The problem, the reality was that, one, there's a very tight space. It's very difficult spatially to get people. Number two, you have the problem of cycling shoes. So what kind of shoes are they wearing, and can they, otherwise we found out they didn't want to take their shoes off. Imagine why not. And also, what happens after the third sculpting segment? What do we do now?
Get back on the bike.
Get back on the bike, right? So it presents a challenge, no pun intended, with regard to that. That being said, if you have, this is one of those times that if you have an alternative space, like you're teaching your cycle sculpt or Edge sculpt in Studio 2 instead of in your cycle studio, have at it. Like if you want to get off the bike for your third set, you absolutely can. I would just be very mindful of what you choose to do, how quickly you choose to do it, and how you're going to get them back on the bike and working hard again one more time. It is not out of the question, but just practice it and make sure. One of the things when I was practicing movements, because I was practicing them at first like on the podiums or on the stage, and then I realized, whoa, this is an awesome movement, until I tried to do it next on the floor, and you realize this is impossible in our space. So it's not out of the question. It just has to be done carefully, and it would be an option for the third block, if that's answers your question, Mel.
Mel, I'm not sure if you can chime in or not, but I know you're typing in the chat. Does that answer your question, Mel? I'll wait for her to comment there, but we have a question coming from Alex. So Alex, speak up whenever you're ready. I'll go ahead and unmute you. There you go.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I've got some birds too, so if they start squawking, I apologize. So my question is for Edge cycle. Let's say we're going for a distance ride, and I say it's 4 minutes. And at the 2 minute mark, let's say I want to challenge them to get that same distance that they had in the 2 minutes again in the second, if not exceed it. Is that okay, first of all?
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, if it is, how do you suggest I explain that?
Okay, perfect. I love that, and I do this a lot. So the really cool thing about that is that if you've hit your console, say, okay, guys, first thing you're going to say is, we're going to see how far we can go in 4 minutes. So you're going to make it you're going to give them, that is the main goal. How far can you go in 4 minutes? Then you're going to give them a variable, right? Which is, how are we going to get there? Is that are we working on a leg strength, or, we're working lower cadence? Are we going to try to do it sitting? Or are we doing standing? Are we mixing it up a little bit, standing and sitting strength? Is it high cadence, low cadence? Great. What I would do then is reserve that 2 minute part till they get to 2 minutes. So at about 90 seconds, I'd say, all right, guys, we're coming up on the 2 minute mark, and something really important is about to happen. Are you ready? Look down at your console. When it clocks at 2 minutes, you're going to take a mental snapshot of the number that you see. You can do some quick math and double that in your mind. That is now your goal to finish. Right? So,
right.
So if it said 0.5 miles at 2 minutes,
mm-hmm.
then say, all right, guys, so whatever it said, you're going to look to double that distance that you see right now to finish for 4.
Correct. So I guess to delve a little deeper, then I have a physics teacher in my class, so he's on me about like talking about speed, as in miles per hour and watts and all that. So yeah. It gets a little, which is great. It helps me as an instructor and just in general. But for the beginner, or the one who hasn't been taking the class too often, that doesn't know, they're where they can go within their thresholds and all. How can I suggest, let's say, them maybe increasing their watts a little bit or their speed? Or would you even advise that?
Absolutely. So here's what you've got to remember. This is what your thoughts of power is: one destination, two ways to get there. Okay. So if I plug into the GPS, I want to get to Lifetime, it's going to give me 2 routes. Power is the same way. I want power. I can get there with more speed and the same resistance, the same speed and more resistance, or more of both. Right. So I like to think about the concept of a variable and a constant. So if I'm trying to get them to get more power, I'm going to say, our job right now is we're gonna try to hold our cadence at 90 to 100. So that's your bottom. Now, to get more power, increase your resistance and don't let your cadence drop. If your cadence drops, decrease it. Decrease your resistance again and hold that. Like, you know what I mean? So they can fine tune their output.
Right.
And then the point about the speed, the miles per hour, I use that a lot because I do think it's more relatable to a lot of people. Watts are. So just for your physics teacher, let him know that it's an algorithm, it's a calculation that assumes that they have done some pretty significant work trying to get the calculation right, but that it assumes an average sized rider moving on a flat road without wind based on the power output they're producing.
Right. Okay.
So if it's saying like at this wattage, if you were on a flat road with no wind and you weighed 150 pounds and you're 5'9", you'd be moving about this fast.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, yeah, it makes sense. He's keeping me on my toes.
Send him to me.
I was thinking about doing that.
Send him to me. I love that. I'll take that.
Yeah.
All day.
Yeah, because when you increase the watt, then your speed's going to increase.
Yeah.
If you keep the cadence. So when I talk about speed, okay, like when you're talking about speed and edge.
A speed challenge is an RPM challenge. A speed challenge is not a speed in miles per hour challenge. Let's be super clear about that.
Okay, and that's what I was trying to explain to him, that when he's like, well, you're saying speed, and I'm like, yeah, I'm talking about RPMs. And he's like, well, you're saying speed, I'm thinking speed. I'm like, well, sorry.
And you can say that.
But so then we're correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And like Emily said, since the algorithm is a flat road model, when you increase the resistance, it's equivalent to putting more gear on your bike. So you can think about a flat road and you're going that smaller cog in the rear of the wheel, if they're that technical. So you'll go fast. You'll go faster at the same cadence, your miles per hour.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. All right. Should we talk about some power, JR?
Let's do it. So let's move over to power. But guys, if you have any questions about Edge, comment in the chat. We'll address those at the end. So keep those questions coming. Again, just comment in the chat. So Jackie, I know you have some questions about power, which we can toss back over to Emily. So what questions do you have about power today?
Maybe the, provocative one. We had a change in, I think, program leadership. And so I'm just wondering, just because I know the history of where master plan came from and how that was tied to the history of the leadership, I'm just curious what's on the horizon for power, and should we experience any changes for it?
So I can't tell you everything right now, but I can tell you this. I, as of today, feel very good that we have secured a super exciting partnership that you're all going to be very excited about. And that's going to make the delivery of the master plan even easier for you. And with leadership that I think you will be jumping up and down for joy when you find out where it's coming from. So we are in an interim, and I mean that with, again, only, and then I say that Troy leaves a giant void in there. And I don't mean that, like, I'm just saying that it was really important to me that as he goes on to his next opportunity, that we were able to not have a break in the momentum of the amazing program that was his, that we all know, like, as you all know, I was, I got excited about this, as we call it, performance cycle. And with Troy, like, he's been my linked arm in arm with this program since 2010. And so you can imagine the same for me. So all I can share is that we wanted to both honor where the program is and continue moving forward with where it's going. And I think that it provided that everything can be is finalized when it's finalized. And hopefully that will be as of June, that we'll be moving forward with as similar as it can be, so that we don't experience any disruptions. But that I think you'll all be very happy with the direction that we're going in, and feel very supported and are very confident in the continued, and even there's some other things I can't really talk about, but like the ease of accessing workouts and how they will sync up with technology, things like that, I think will be very exciting for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't even know about this, and I'm very excited to find out what is going to happen. So when we announce any changes, how do we plan on announcing that, Emily?
That's a great question, and I will, as soon as I know, I'll make sure that if it's safe to put out on the grid, that we'll do that. We may end up hosting maybe we'll host a special roundtable power specific to introduce that. And we probably will need to do some kind of a training call in the future on how if the platform of accessing those workouts changes, et cetera. And that would be easier for you, by the way. So we're all about creating an exciting new way forward that builds on the legacy of everything that's great and continues to keep it evolving.
Cool. So since we're on the power topic, what other questions do you have about power today, team?
They're asking about kits, about power and tri kits. JR probably knows more about apparel than I do. So why don't you take that one?
Okay, so I don't have any updates for you on the cycle apparel. You know, a lot of momentum, there's a lot of going really, really fast with apparel, and then there's a lot of things that derail us. I don't have any updates for you there, but like what we've done in the past, we always post this stuff on the grid. So any updates that happen with the apparel, just stay tuned to the grid and we'll be letting you know, likely before it even hits the online store. So stay tuned about the kits.
Awesome. I do have one thing I want to add too, mostly since Jackie brought this up yesterday. I did put or maybe it was earlier in the week, Wednesday, I did create a document that shows the power zones and such that could be printed. There is a little bit of communication, or I should say consistency, I noticed on the colors of the heart rate zones. And maybe you saw that discussion on the grid, but I did create that document that says, these are the power zones, these are the associated colors, and these are the percentages of FTP. So that's a helpful, useful tool. I don't think that the colors should be too confusing on the heart rate zones, because we know that heart rate zones and power zones are related, but they're not the same thing. So the most important thing is understanding what percentage of functional threshold heart rate is being taken and shown as that color. So that's what you want to be able to have them understand. Number two, I want you guys, and I hope you know this, but just in case you don't, if you've never dived in, or maybe you do this, but you haven't told your participants to dive into their post-workout emails, you can really get all that power data. And that chart that I pulled and I put on that document came straight from a post-workout email. You just have to go into see my power details, and it's going to show you everything about your workout. And if you have your FTP in there, people are like, well, I did the FTP test, but I didn't know what my FTP is. Guess what? Your report, if you had it recorded in LT Connect, your FTP is now recorded in your profile, and every single post-workout email that you get will have your FTP in there. It's there. It knows, and it's going to record your data. It's going to give you your post-workout information with that FTP number, and you can go in and take a look at that report. If you dive into the details, see the colors, see the percentage of time you spent in each power zone, and much more detailed than just the average workout report. The other thing that's cool, guys, if you're wondering, this is another fun thing. In that post-workout email, there's something that, if you dig into the power details, this would be for Edge and Power, it shows normalized power. Do you guys know why normalized power is important?
Doesn't it take out kind of the warm up and some of the cool down and takes out those two big outliers and gives you more of a true representation?
Essentially, it looks at, so for example, if I did 2 1-hour rides and one of them was super high intensity intervals with a lot of recovery in between, and my other one was a 1-hour steady state, but both rides averaged 150 watts, those are not the same ride, right? The training stress from those intervals, even though my average was the same, it's a very different workout on my body. So Training Peaks talks about the training stress score, and some of you guys may know about TSS scores and things like that. If you don't worry about it unless you teach power, in which case you should know and dig into finding more about that. But you need to, the other thing about normalized power is if you have your edge participants looking at it and they're wondering where they at, how intense their workout really was, rather than having them go, okay, every workout I'm trying to go more miles. That's actually not a very effective way for them to see if they're getting fitter, because they're just they may be not doing the workout, right? It's kind of like, we call it racing every workout. And you don't get results that way, because then they won't recover properly. They won't do anything. So looking at average watts at the end of your class is actually not an awesome way to decide how great the ride was, based on, because it's going to have if you're, again, hard intervals, the recoveries are baked in. Your ramping and your cooling down, all those things are in there. Normalized power is going to give you a much clearer picture of how intense the workout really was. And it's going to give you a power number that in many cases is very close to one's FTP. So if they start noticing that their normalized power is always around 160 or 170 or whatever it is, that's probably darn close to their FTP, even if they haven't done an FTP test. Fun fact.
Cool. So guys, we are just about 50 minutes past the hour. Roundtable.
Mel, that edge top.
Minutes. Huh?
That came from a grand opening.
Okay, so hang on one sec. Let's wrap up with power and let's move into amp cycle, guys. So any other questions about the power cycle format? Are we feeling pretty good to go there? Emily, you froze. I'm not sure if you can hear my voice right now, but you might need to log off and then come back on with us. So let's move to amp cycle. What questions do you guys have about the amp cycle and amp sculpt formats? And I see, Ariel, your hand going up. What question do you have for us?
Yes, I have 2 quick questions. Okay, so the first one is during sculpts, I know that we are supposed to use purple lights during each sculpt segment. My question is there a point where we're allowed to put on disco lights? Like, can we change at any point, or is it just straight purple the entire song?
Got it. Great question. So does anyone know why we have the purple light on anyway? Why we have that into the brand for the sculpting sections for 4, 7, and 10? Why?
Well, it's our color, and
the color
I
for
also
the
think
sculpt.
it's easier to see as you're teaching. People can see your movements and your arms.
That's the whole point. So some of our laser lights, a lot of our lights are just not bright enough to light the room. So for example, reaching to grab weights, lighting the room enough to see that. If you drop a weight, being able to safely and effectively get off of your bike to pick up the weight if that happens. So I would suggest to save the flashing lights, any other colored lights for the other acts, and to stick with the purple for 4, 7, and 10, because really the whole objective, yes, it is the branded color, but the real objective there is so it illuminates the room enough so we can see what we're doing.
Yeah.
And for the performers that get off the bike, there's a lot of performers that, like myself, I'm off the bike for the entire act of 4 and 10. I'm on the bike for 7 because that's the core section. But for 4 and 10, I can see where I'm going.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And then my second question, the lever. So we're allowed to use the lever. And I remember at Empower, Alexis kind of touched on, she's like, if you're going to use the lever, use it. Don't just use it in like 1 or 2 songs. So is there any kind of like, how many songs do you want to use in, a percentage, that type of thing, that if we do use it? Because before that, I would literally have like 2 songs that I was using it in.
Okay, so I have a couple suggestions, and Emily, go ahead and chime in as well. So when I use the lever, I only use it in 4 and 10. When I am asking members to sit down, to reach down, grab their weights when they're seated in the saddle, so they can catch enough resistance. So I'll likely have them put it in the center position. There are classes though where I don't use the shifter, where I'm only speaking to the resistance levels. So to continue to speak to the feeling. So in terms of a percentage in your class, just keep it consistent from your classes. So for me, I have gotten into the habit of only 4 and 10. So I weave that into my introduction. Guys, we do use the shifter in AMP Sculpt. We'll be using it only 2 times when we're using the weights.
Oh, 4 and 10.
You set the expectation. And so I think whatever you do, I don't think you have to have any kind of, there's any magic number about it. But I think that, you know, to Alexis's point, use it, like, don't like just use it like one time and then they kind of forget. You want to get them used to it, I think is kind of what she's saying. Like, use it, you know, but it doesn't mean you have to feel like you got to use it constantly. And I love JR setting the expectation. We're going to use it twice, 4 and 10, done. It's perfect, right? So, you know, I think setting expectations is really, that's like key to everything.
Totally.
And I would,
like I like to do like a lever song where it will speed up and then slow down. So when it slows, you know, we shift it, slow it down, and then as the music speeds up, sit, take it off.
Yep.
Okay.
Future Edge cyclist coming up.
Nope, I want her all to AMP cycle. Sorry, Em.
Yeah, but she's here. I can speak into her ears.
So let's keep talking about AMP Cycle and AMP Sculpt. What other questions do you have? And thank you for chiming in, Ariel.
So me and Ariel are actually kind of brainstorming because I'm not in a situation, I wish I were with Casey, that we were getting all of these people waitlisted and things like that. But we're starting to really build momentum. But what we're finding is we're not getting people to reserve their bikes. And so like we'll walk into a class and there will only be 10 people. And during Edge, like since I teach both, I see that the Edge people will reserve their bikes because they love that email at the end. So we were kind of brainstorming and wondering if it's possible. I never have people turn on their console. We never use LT Connect. But would it possibly be something we could run in the background, not on the screens, nothing, to kind of get that buy-in and be like, we're in a gym, we're in a club. Yes, this is a fitness class. Yes, it is a dance party. But you do get this little extra thing at the end to show you that you did put in a little bit of effort here. So I'm trying to get more buy-in from the members, but wasn't sure if that was kosher.
That's always been an option, Eliza. You can run in the background.
All you have to do is just turn it on, and then they get the pro support.
Right. Yep. Okay. I like that idea because you know, at all the boutiques they're doing that, whatever it is, and you know, we're trying to be our own brand, but also, you know, still have that little oomph at the end of class. So they're like, okay, I did this much, let's go further or whatever. So cool.
You know, another suggestion about getting members to reserve their bikes, bringing it back to, you know, there's a lot of AMP members that are just showing up. So to get them to reserve, you know, there's things that we can do on our own. First, I would always suggest that you partner with your studio manager and your leadership at the club to drive the awareness of the importance of reserving your bike. But also through our social media channels, it is just a standard. Now, when I'm posting on my social media, again, I'll bring it back to Alexis. She cracks the whip with getting members. I mean, this was within weeks when she came to St. Louis Park. Nobody was reserving a bike. Mm-hmm. And everyone, I would say that it's probably up to about 90% of the members that go to the classes. And it's thanks to her driving the awareness, but also posting on social media to reserve your bike. And if they have questions, you know, connect with them on that, on how easy it is.
I was doing a bunch of drawings. If you reserve a bike, one person in class, I'll do a random drawing from somebody who reserved, and you'll get an AMP hat. We don't have AMP hats anymore, but at one point, like I had like 20 people with AMP hats on. It looked amazing, but I'm trying to get more buy-in, so we'll do that.
I have another suggestion for you. So this suggestion is helpful all year long, especially going into the warm months, especially for those of us that are in like the Midwest. So tease to members what they're going to be experiencing on the days that you teach any of our classes. But for example, for my AMP classes, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, Thursday is my only sculpt class. Monday, Wednesday are my amp cycle classes. I always tease a day in advance what they're going to be experiencing in that class. So I always theme my classes, and always, as of within the last few months, because we had a huge problem with people no-showing, tons. Like I would have like 45 people on the wait list, and we'd have like 20 open bikes. Made me very, very, very sad. So a thing that I've just tried is to theme my classes. So for example, Monday will be like arms. What do I do here? Like arm day, something like that. We have choreography that is very, very challenging on your buys, tries, shoulders, forearms. They know that they are going to crush it with added arm choreography that night. Then on my Wednesday night class, core. We are going to address more core tonight. So I will add in some more core challenges. So they know what's going to be happening in class. It helps with my newsworthy content that I'm posting on social media. So it gives me something to talk about, and they're excited about it. So by theming my classes, driving the awareness and the importance of reserving your bike, the strikes help. Now, you know that we've got the strike system. I've got 100%. I do have 100% occupancy. It's very rare when there's an open bike and waitlisted people are coming to class because of those few things that are just all helping one another. Theming my classes, having my studio managers drive the importance, and it's working. So try it. What other questions you guys have about Amp Cycle today, guys? So Amp Sculpt, how are your Amp Sculpt classes going? Any questions there? Rocking it? So
I need to test out.
Huh?
I need to test out.
Well, do that. Yes. Are you teaching?
Not sculpt, but I'm teaching edge sculpt, not amp sculpt yet. I have to do my test out.
Cool.
Rock test outs. She's so good.
Thank you.
It's awesome. Emily, any questions for me regarding AMP?
Oh my gosh, I'm on stereo. Oh, hang on. I'm trying to get my phone to, no, leave.
And you're muted.
JR, so when are you going? Oh, shit.
I got you.
There you are.
Okay. I would like to know, when are you going to do another, are you going to do an on-air live AMP Sculpt? Because I would love to see you do that.
Is that like the buzz in the field right now? Because Alexis just reached out to me about the same exact thing.
No, and not at all. I just thought that because I want to see.
Thursday of next week. So AMP Sculpt on-air live next Thursday. So here's the deal. I used to lead all of the live classes back in the day, like more than a year ago, when we only had this for AMP. We moved into Edge and Power, and there was a lot of ask from the field of like, can I lead a live class? So then I'm like, okay, sure, you guys do it. I'm bringing it back. So I will be leading an AMP Sculpt class next Thursday, and of course, if you miss it, just check out the bank. So I'll be showing you movements.
What time?
Purpose. Noon Central next Thursday. I'd love
Got
to
it.
have you.
JR, I also would love to know, since you have been using some of the shifter and in AMP Sculpt and experimenting with it with some of the RPM considerations that we discussed, right? A little bit of a change, getting rid of the anything below super heavy low BPM. How has that gone for you, and how are you? I'd love to hear your experiences with that, because I know that's been a cool journey for you as well.
Yeah, in the beginning I was like, hell no, I'm not doing this. But the reality is, you guys, I absolutely love it. First of all, it challenged me to mix up my classes. Like, we all need that. And this like kicked me in the butt to actually make a change and to understand why we made that change. The high level resistance back in the day was a slow push. It made perfect sense to me. I loved it because it was a vibe. It was a feeling. I liked the variety in class. So when I took it out, I replaced it with a run. And the way that I do the run is On the tips of the handlebars, arrow. So it's like tips, arrows. So it's a rhythmic run. My classes are so much harder in a positive way, where members are drenched more than normal. And I can tell that this beast is coming out of them in a way that it just wasn't before. Yeah. And I really, really believe that it's because I swapped out the act that I typically would do, the high level resistance push, with a run, rhythmic run. So I love it. I am so happy that we made that change. And then with the shifter, it was a challenge for me, because the way that we branded Amp Cycle was to not use the shifter, keep it all the way to the left. I love it in my Amp Cycle classes. In Amp Sculpt, it makes sense, because when I do my weighted movements all seated, that's just how I like it. It'll probably change over time, but to add that quick shift makes so much sense when we're seated. Reach down, put it in the center position. Then we're doing the sculpting. After that act, just have them push it back to the left. That's how I like it. But anyway, it just makes perfect sense, and it has a ton of purpose. So yeah, I really, really do love it. And that's not a beauty pageant answer. Like, I really do love that we made that change.
One thing that I think you guys maybe know this, but I think it always bears repeating, JR and I were talking about this earlier, is that you can achieve all the same benefits, all the exact same things with or without the quick shift. The quick just gets you there faster. But, so I've heard people like, oh, I've heard, you can only go slower resistance with the quick shift to the right. You guys, all the quick shift does is add resistance, and it adds it evenly relative to what you started with. So if you have nothing, what is my favorite math equation? Nothing plus nothing equals?
Nothing.
Ariel.
Okay, so because of that answer, can I play devil's advocate and say, then why is it not allowed in AMP and just AMP Sculpt if it's just a quick changeover?
So look, likely one day that might change. But with Amp Cycle, we base the resistance level completely off of feeling, and we don't sit down very much in Amp Cycle class. In Amp Sculpt, when we move down to reach down over our shoulders to grab the weights, we have to sit down to do that. And for those of us that are doing those sculpting movements seated, adding a quick shift just makes sense, so our legs can stay with the beat and still feel that challenge.
I think that, so the problem with you saying that is people are taking that and saying, well, they said someday, so I'm just going to do it now and not wait till that day. So sadly, because of that answer, I've been seeing people using the lever in regular AMP.
Yeah, that's been happening for the last few years.
Okay. I was like, well, I even hear managers being like, well, someday they're going to do it. So I'm like.
And if you're a person that's doing that and you're listening recorded or live, we can sleep at night, because bottom line, you're likely giving it purpose and reason when you're using the shifter. Amp Cycle, as it exists, the brand doesn't call for the shifter. Amp Sculpt does. Emily, is there anything that you want to add there?
So what I would add to that is that because it wasn't trained, one of the challenges with AMP, and one of the things that's great about AMP, people came in with no baggage, right? They just taught AMP. But one of the challenges was that there were also a lot of baseline levels of knowledge that weren't taught, right? That goes everything from bike setup to everything else, right? So it's like to add in yet another aspect of something that we don't have in the current training, to try to go back and make sure everybody, not to ask everybody to go back through a test out or whatever else, right? So we are looking at refreshing all of the signature format trainings. And so if that change were to be made, that would be when it would be made, so that we could ensure that everybody, maybe there was one module that we could ensure consistency for safety and application across the board. So instead of just saying, hey, go do it, and now giving nobody, I mean, frankly, I'm dealing with this with Edge, like people never got trained on how to use the consoles, really, right? And so it's like, here you go, here's this toy, and people that get it, and now there's people that come through that still have no clue on what, and they're telling people what power number they should be hitting and all kinds of nonsense because they didn't get trained on it. And so I'm trying to go back, and we don't want to do that. We want to avoid creating opportunities where people don't know how to use something effectively, help them to help their participants, and all of us be consistent. So I don't know if that helps, but Jared, did you agree with that?
I'm so happy that you went there. The bottom line, we haven't taught it. we haven't taught performers specifically with AMP how to use the shifter. So, throwing that on them is, it's not the right thing to do, but bottom line, we need to teach you how to use it and how to speak to it, how to cue to it, and what the overall purpose is. Any other questions about AMP cycle today, guys, as we're about 7 minutes past the hour? Well, then I think we should go ahead and wrap. Emily, anything else that you want to add today?
No, I just love these I just love you guys. Your little faces make me so happy. And I really love our integration of our team. And I think kudos to JR for getting everybody together, because I think, we are one big, I hope that we all understand how unique what that we do is at Lifetime on the bike. And that we have this approach that really is, like I said, different pedal strokes for different folks, including all of us, and we can all grow, and it's a continuum, and we all learn from each other, and we get to get more butts on bikes this way. So I love it, and I love that we can all have a conversation about it.
And we love you guys.
We love you.
We do.
Yeah.
Now that we've all met, it means so much more.
Jared, I think we should have just a talk show. Don't you think? Should we be like the new Regis and Kathy Lee, only under cycle?
I am 1000% in. Yes. Completely in. Next time you're back in Minnesota, let's go to LT Vision, and we can use the White Room.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm jealous. Me and Ariel will take a road trip.
I was like, Ariel will drive out.
And by the way, Ariel, I want to tell you, I didn't know that did you come out to be in, I should probably, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I saw you in the Upper Body RX footage. So we were reviewing it. It's going to be awesome.
All of her dreams came true.
I know.
All of her unicorn dreams.
Oh. Okay.
Hopefully I'll make it out for, I'm going to try to come out for Empower too.
Into Minnesota?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, my loves.
So, hey, on that note, really quick. So with Empower, it is in Garden City next weekend. We have an Instagram Live later today at 5 p.m. Central Time with one of the performers and presenters that's teaching out there. His name is, oh my gosh, give me a second.
JR!
Hang on a second. Give me 2 seconds.
Uh-oh.
It's not Jacob. I keep wanting to say Jacob. Joseph David. So I found him on Instagram. Katie, of course, already knew him. He was already teaching at Lifetime. Incredible human. Absolutely incredible. The way that he teaches, the way that he connects, his connection. Absolutely awesome. So if you want to tune into Empower Instagram Live later today, Joseph David and myself will be having a conversation about just everything with Empower. So please tune in and just be a part of the conversation. So that's all we have today for Roundtable Cycle. We'll be coming right back at you in May, the last Friday of the month. So if you have any questions, please reach out to Emily or myself. We'll get those questions answered for you. And don't ever feel like you're not supported, because that's the whole point of having these conversations, because we do support you. So let's do this together. So that's all we have. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Happy Friday.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.